name's Paul. I'm a Wiradjuri man from my father's side, from central New South Wales. And I grew up with polio. I contracted polio when I was 18 months old. So I've lived with a disability all my life, well, not yet. And I've worked in the industry of disabilities for around 30 years. So I'm quite passionate about providing services and supports and getting things right for our mob.
Hi, my name's Susie, and today I'll be talking on behalf of myself and my mum. Everyone in our family has some form of disability or mental health illness, and it's difficult at times, but shows like a lot of strength in our family. And also just thought I'd mention that I'm Wiradjuri.
My name is Tracy, and I'm a coastal woman. I've grown up in the Burleigh Heads area on the Gold Coast in the Tallebudgera hinterland. My disability is depression and anxiety, and I have been battling this for quite some time now. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Auntie Robin Lennox of the Kalkadoon people, and this is my son Joshua. Joshua has lived with a disability for 35 years of his 37 years. The entire family were in a motor vehicle accident when he was 2, and he was left a vegetable, but these days he eats, talks, walks, and is a great artist.
Disability in Aboriginal culture there isn't even a word for disability in our culture. The closest thing in my language is gugun, which means unable to walk, or waragun, which means to walk with a limp. But it doesn't talk about any permanency or a disability, it just talks about injury. So in community, it's very difficult to even identify disability, to even have the conversation about it. And traditionally, it could just be that someone needs a certain amount of help with something. You still do things, you just do it differently. Like I use my walking stick to get around. So I'm sort of known for my walking stick. Someone might just need a bit of help with hearing. Can't hear properly, so when you talk to uncle, make sure you talk loud enough for them to hear. But also can vary. That's not the rule in all communities. In some communities, it can be a shame attached to having a disability. It can be related to having a child with a disability, could be because you were married wrong way, so it's being punished by the ancestors. In some communities, it's still much a shame where people never leave their house. But so you can never look at it in one particular way in all communities. But overall, it's basically just someone who needs a bit of help, and the whole community takes on a role of supporting that person, or the family supports that family. Different roles in family, a lot of that's been influenced very much or taken away by colonisation. Because traditionally, for instance, the younger children will look after their grandparents or the frail age people that needed support. But unfortunately, with families being broken up and moved off country, a lot of those traditional roles have gone. And it's not always just the one person who looks after someone. You've got to be very careful not to identify someone just as that carer, because if you take the role away from the rest of the community, they'll step away. And then when it's that person can no longer do that role, there's no one else to come in and support. You've also got to be very careful with someone with a disability is not spotlighting them in the community and making out that they're very, very different. It's just a case of someone does something differently and they need some support to be able to do that and get out in the community and do things. For instance, a young person with a disability, their mother may take them down the shop each day. Well, you don't want to stop them taking them down the shop, but maybe if they had a wheelchair, it'd make it a lot easier for them to get down the shop. So it's supporting what things are already in place. We also have to be very careful too and be very aware of intergenerational trauma. A lot of people from stolen generation have now that trauma's gone on to their children as well. So mental illness is often quite prevalent in community, but not recognised.
The well-being of the whole group is much more useful than the label of illness. It's the well-being of everybody. In the past, some of what we've seen as illness was considered a spiritual disconnection. Our spirit connects us to our soul and our Creator. This is what heals. The entire group all work together in assisting the person to figure this out. Although some of these ways have been lost, it's important to try and help communities to work this out. It's vital not to confuse some cultural practices with mental illness. Example, cutting and scarring yourself may be a cultural practice and not an attempt to self-harm. It's also really important to understand that some of what people are experiencing is the intergenerational effects of colonisation. That effect goes down the line. It affects everybody in the family. Even for those who are not aware that they are Aboriginal till later years, it has created what we now consider as illness. You have that to deal with, and that as well as the impact of any other mental health or physical disability. I know for myself, growing up with the intergenerational effects, that trauma is something that everybody in our family has had to deal with since my mum got stolen from her family.
There's no one way of looking at that, actually. It's not only families, but sometimes you need to look at services that will actually strengthen the whole community, enabling them to support those people in their community with disabilities. And the different way we look at it too is it's not always about the services, like domestic assistance, personal care is very important. But culturally, people need to build their spirit. People need to be able to connect to their community, connect to their family, connect to their culture. They need to have that role that they play. It also means too that what you need to do in order to provide that service is sometimes you need to engage with the whole community. You need to find out what disability looks like in that community. You need to look like the effects or the impact that colonisation has had on that community. And you need to address things like women's business, men's business. Are you supporting a female with a disability? Then you need to go to the women elders to see what's the best way to support that person. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. Personally, I think that should be across the board, whether you're dealing with Aboriginal people, non-Aboriginal people. The best thing to do is always acknowledge person's connection to culture, to their community, who's doing those roles in the family, and what can strengthen them and build their resilience and give them that place. Often too, people are living off country in urban areas. People aren't living on land. They're not living in their traditional owners, so they've lost that role altogether. So sometimes it might be even just creating a group where people can come together and support each other and have that role within that group. And often going into community too, as I said, you need to go and see the elders. But sometimes the elders, the most powerful people in that community, are the women. And that goes back to sometimes back in settlement when people were taken and moved all country. And the men were put out to work in the fields and the farms, and the women were the ones that stayed back and supported the family and kept culture alive, which, was against the rules to do that in some of the places. So I've been in a community where the first people I speak to are the women elders, which is difficult for me as a male. So I have to be very respectful in how I speak to them and engage. So sometimes you need to address that as well. Having women workers and male workers to be respectful when you engage with community. You look at kinship roles as well. Aboriginal families, even though it varies, and I'm not saying this is the same for every single community, but it's not the same as the white nuclear family. There are multiple roles. Aunties can take on the role of mother for children as well. Their brothers can also be the support people for their sisters' children as well, depending who they married. So people take on very varying different roles within the family, and you need to be aware of that as well. And often what happens as well is there's a lot of unidentified people living with disability in community or in families. You may go in to speak to a particular person to address the needs of a person with a disability. You sit down, you find out there's other members of the family living with different disabilities as well that's never been acknowledged or even recognised. So you have to be aware that sometimes in order to support one person in the family, you may have to support other people as well to keep that family strong.
Many Aboriginal families are frightened that if they ask for help, the person with a disability may be taken away, or because they are seen as not being able to cope. This is a real threat. People may fear being judged or being too frightened to get the help they need in the early stages. The whole assessment process is not particularly culturally respectful or sensitive. It can be difficult to maintain cultural ways when you have to go through the process of getting a medical diagnosis. Sometimes it's inappropriate for a man to speak about their problems or to help a woman, or vice versa. Sometimes it's an age thing. We have to respect the dignity of our elders, and sometimes it may not be appropriate for a young worker to assess or to interview an older person. Many people would also feel safer if they could access a worker from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background, because they would have more of an idea of what it's like being Aboriginal and being part of an Aboriginal family. There are also people who don't ask for help because they don't see that they have a disability or a problem. You may need to make sure you ask the right question to find out what a person's actual ability and disability is.
Firstly, the help needs to be culturally safe. This is more than just hanging a couple of paintings on the wall. Services should try to maintain roles and dignity. Separate services for clients and carers, adults and children doesn't always work. It can interfere with family and community structure. People need to have a choice about a worker from an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander background, or from a man or a woman. On the other hand, kids need to be approached differently than adults. They need to do things rather than just yarning. It is important that workers approach things holistically, and it's not always about doing for people. Physical help can be important, but people should still be encouraged to do things for themselves and to help others out. This gives them a sense of self-worth and keeps them connected to their family and their community. Sometimes people just need to help to connect back into their communities. They have been disconnected and don't know who their own mob is. Once they reconnect, they are in a much better position to be able to sort things out for themselves and to find out what resources are out there. Sometimes people are not in their own country, and so sometimes it can be helpful to have a community group that they can go to so they can feel like they belong. These things may not sound like much, but they are really, really important.
If we are really talking about the well-being of people and of the whole community, and about communities helping and supporting themselves and each other, we should be talking about healing. Healing must always come from within. With or without the services, it must come from within. Otherwise, it is not healing at all. Healing is about being able to stay strong and resilient despite illness. It is much more about feeling safe, both inside yourself and within your community. It is about feeling like a worthy individual who can make a contribution, and it should be about healing the spirit. You can put band-aids on things, and really it's just superficial. But if you heal the spirit and give people a sense of worth, of belonging, that makes all the difference. Sometimes all that's needed is for a service to provide a safe space for people to come to, and people are able then to figure out a way to do things themselves. Like, for instance, with Josh, once a culturally safe and appropriate place for us to go to with the art group, we came across Uncle Ron, who mentored Josh, and in the process, Josh has become a very good artist because of it. And also, in the same respect, it's helped Josh with his aggression, with his epilepsy, because he now feels worthy. He has something that he is able to do and give others joy as well. His whole manner has changed. In the old days, people would just all come together as a group and yarn about things and work things out if there were problems. They would do things that kept them connected to their culture. This was the way they kept strong and healed themselves. Nowadays, we still do this. We can come together to paint and yarn, to tell our stories, to connect and have fun. We are seen as an Aboriginal person first, an artist second. Unique individuals who have a contribution to make to our families, our friends, and to the wider community. We are not just seen as a disability. When our mob comes together for art and our storytelling, we have the opportunity of receiving knowledge passed down through our elders. We have found that when people have an opportunity to yarn and paint, they find that they may not need support or don't need as many services and supports as what was first thought.
I'm happy and I've done it. The minute everything.